We are all introduced to stationery and art supplies as kids and in school, and most of us have an absolute ball with it. How do some of these hold up when you are an adult? And also, what are some grown-up versions of favorite kids' art supplies? And are they worth trying out? Stay tuned for more.
Hello and welcome to Stationery Test Drive, where every week we take common tools and uncommon tools on artistic journeys. I'm Vishal.
This is Minjal.
I'm Samir. And today, as our roundup for the last 12 videos, we are going back to school. We figured that a lot of the materials that we tried over the past few weeks were things that we either used in school or updates of those, and so we're trying to talk about what our favorites were when we were kids and how they have been updated over the years.
Right, like a lot of you, we were kids once, at least that's what we're told. And right now we're told that we are adults and also that we're artists. Now, all of that is up for debate, but what is not up for debate is that these are some really nice tools that we have used in various things and various ways. So why don't we just clear the board and talk about them individually for a bit. We get running, quite appropriately, with scissors, which you really shouldn't run with, either as a kid or as an adult or as an artist, unless you're a performance artist, in which case, I don't know, get safety scissors. I love scissors. I've used them even as a kid, never ran with them, made lots of things. But these are actually, this is the Munix. We talked about this in our episode. We talked about a lot of scissors in our episode. These are better because as kids we used to get those safety scissors. I don't know if you remember those, the ones with the really blunt ends and covered up, and they were very cute, but they were kind of terrible to cut with, weren't they?
Yeah, they had plastic coverings on the metal edges.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I liked those and I disliked the plastic things was that you couldn't get a point, and the good thing about these is the points that you can get, the little corners you can cut into, which you can't do with safety scissors. I think all of us leaned into that in our various scissor things. This was mine, which is the collage, photo collage, and there was Minjal's who did lovely typography, and Samir who did almost box origami or box paper cut
Pop-up,
art.
I guess.
Pop-up art, yes, I know. I'm mixing all my terms today.
But
mixing
no fingers
things
were harmed in the making of this.
Yeah, I mean, this is an entire... Samir, show us your injury because, we might as well get people some sympathy for that because, it's a paper cut quite appropriately.
Do we get some more views and likes for this?
Please tell us if you enjoy Samir's Band-Aid fashion or if you should get something a bit more cool looking. Speaking of cool looking things or rather cool smelling things, Minjal, tell us about the scent of Fevicol.
Well, this was the drug that, as a child was available.
I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that.
You went right there.
Drugs, medicines, children.
Hi, kids. Here's an important message from your Uncle Bill. Don't buy drugs.
So, yeah, this was a lot of... This literally took me back to school when we tested this episode because I spent, all my... We had craft, classes in school, all of us. And marble paper is what we used to, use very often. The really thin sheets to make craft projects. And it was really bad quality paper, maybe 20, 30 GSM. That would essentially tear when you used Fevicol. So I remember just lining up my fingers with blobs of Fevicol and then, letting it dry and then play with it pretty much it was plasticine or something. So this episode, whatever we did with the Fevicol was a lot of fun because this is, it's cheap, but it's still one of the best adhesives out there.
Yeah, it was surprisingly useful as an adult. And maybe things that we appreciated about it as adults were quite different from when we were kids.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I made with it was certainly a treat and a challenge, but also a lot of fun. This is still now, over a month later, and still, it still works. So
And what we also used is the student grade Fevicol. I'm guessing this is not even the professional Fevicol. There are lots of variants I read.
Yeah, I mean, I think the professional grade is, of course, meant more for carpenters and hardware sort of uses. So I think this is as good as it gets when it comes to paper anyway.
You know, I need to find a way to keep this opened up like this, and I think the answer will be Fevicol in some form.
So this is my adult version of not using marble paper but using foam sheets. That stuck. I was surprised because these are I was skeptical about whether they will actually hold. They're these slippery sheets, foam sheets, but they actually held on together. And there are 7 sheets here, all stuck on each other.
I think there's a certain chemistry to these kinds of non-woven materials, these sort of foam materials. It depends on which type they are.
I think we spoke about this during our episode. Fevicol works by kind of seeping into the tiny pores of the material, and these do have that.
Right.
So it works good with things that are slightly porous, including paper, like what I did with it. Or the very flimsy paper you were talking about in school. I believe that's called sugar paper. It's a very sort of cheap, easy to use.
Okay.
Especially for kids, but very disposable. Like it just breaks apart immediately.
Without you actually having made anything with
that
it.
Too, sometimes. But yeah, this was extremely...
I'm looking at all of these now, even later with especially all 6 of these together. And they're the definition of what you kind of, at least what I aspired to create in craft as a kid, that I sometimes never got the...
it's like this is what you would imagine you wanted to make when you were a kid, but then you didn't have the dexterity or the time or the exposure to the ideas to actually come up with it.
Yeah.
Right. I think the fun thing is that we should, as adults, and we keep discussing this, go back to some of these materials and make our own adult version craft pieces.
Well, I think making adult versions of crafts can certainly get you into certain sticky situations.
Become a pop star and they give you them for free.
But speaking of things that we have maybe have given up as children, Samir and I certainly have not given up on this next tool, which we have always loved and continue to love, the humble square origami paper.
I have been using origami paper probably since I was 3, if I'm not mistaken. And the first origami paper I ever got was a little book of origami with maybe 5 or 6 models that my dad had picked up at an airport bookshop. And if any of you grew up in the 80s, these were very popular. They were Japanese books that were almost square, I think. And they had a sleeve at the back with maybe 10 or 12 sheets of origami paper. And that was the first time I came across the idea of there being special paper to play with.
Well, this paper is pretty special. We got the Muji one for this one, which is a 2-sided one.
Yeah.
So one side is white and one side is colored. And I didn't do origami because I've done, like we said, origami all my life. I did Kirigami, which is something that was in that book, if I remember right.
Yes.
It went over all these various Japanese paper folding and cutting methods.
Yes.
And Kirigami was one of them. I loved it. I didn't use a scissor. I think, actually I did use a scissor. So like this is thematically all together. I used Fevicol on this one. I used the scissor on this one. I used Japanese origami paper on this one.
Synergy.
So since we're talking about books, I actually made an origami book. Now, as a kid, I never really tried origami a lot. But I think after I met Samir and Vishal, you guys, and maybe mostly following Samir's Papernautic website and channel, I started using and making origami models much more. So this was my experiment.
Well, other than that, after that, I kind of got into it a little more. So did Samir and I.
I think we both folded these during the episode.
Yeah, but Samir, show us yours because
in case this isn't colorful and noisy enough.
Yeah.
I also made this.
Wow. And in a smaller fashion, I made this, which is also a module. Not as elegant or as impressive as yours, but they're both kind of lovely. And they're both just with normal sheets of paper and maybe... of obviously a few hours of work.
Yeah, and just a reminder, while there are all these magnificent things here, I also made this book.
I think the book is the most magnificent thing because Yeah, like these are all decorative ultimately. The great thing about this is you could actually use it.
Yes.
No, and you could use it especially with the Muji paper because, it has the
white side.
The white side, yeah.
So yeah, going back as an artist, as an adult, to tools that you only maybe had a chance to use as a kid is something that I would gladly recommend. It's part of the ethos of this channel anyway, is to take common things, and most of those common stationery things are things aimed at kids, let's face it.
Yeah, and one of the things that we wanted to cover, which we kind of haven't gotten to yet, is actually clay or plasticine. Because we all played with that as kids.
Yeah, but speaking of Minjal's sticky situations, I think we found the adult version of plasticine, didn't we?
Yes.
We talked about this in the episode, and in this little suitcase is
the Faber-Castell Kneadable
art eraser. The Kinet Gummi Radierer. Please, Germans in the comments, sound off and tell me how terrible that pronunciation is.
This is where the subtitle in the video goes German mispronunciation.
And yeah, we were kind of wondering if maybe Faber-Castell is, since they also make plasticine for play and for children, maybe this is also just...
This is just a rebranding of...
Yeah. But if you want to play with plasticine when you're an adult, you can certainly do worse than this. You can go into modeling clay and all that, but if you just enjoy like playing around with it tackily, get yourself a pencil and paper, and use this to knock back some drawings or erase things, and I loved using it. It's not a... We talked about this, Minjal, you brought up this point. It's not a beginner tool or a kid's tool in some ways.
Yeah, it's not.
This is we talked about the rest of them as being childhood things. This is kind of something you're only really going to use as, let's say, a young adult or an adult.
And I think that's a good direction for us to kind of talk about, because this is both an update to kids' plasticine and an update to a kid's eraser.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hey, you know what? You need both of them to actually get some of these effects.
And speaking of updates, I think now that we've explored a few of these things that are literally the same thing we used as kids, there are several things that we covered over the past several episodes which are kind of updates for artists of things that we used as kids, and I think we're going to talk about those next.
Yeah, let's just clear the board and we'll get back to those. So when we were kids, I don't know about you, but I painted on walls, at least with crayons. So let's call that, oil pastel frescoes. I
did a lot of scribbling on cardboard and cartons. So.
Yes, so does my niece actually. We have cartons around somewhere, and there's like, I can see how tall she was based on where the markings were on the things.
What about you, Misha?
No, I was also a wall painter.
Two fresco artists in the house.
Well, now that we're older, people tell us that we should be serious artists, and being a serious artist includes doing things on canvas. Well, guess what? It's actually kind of pretty easy to get a decent canvas. This one is an acrylic primed 20 by 20 centimeter one, and we did all of these with them. Great fun to use, I think, in all the mediums, from decoupage and collage to just plain acrylic and gouache, and
to also acrylic paints, yes.
Yeah.
And Posca markers.
Our lovely Posca markers, which we covered in our last roundup and also used before that in a whole episode.
And we talk about them in every episode.
A lot. I think the Poscas are going to turn into our new Ecoline inks and new Rhodia pad, both of which are coming up soon. But canvas, I don't consider myself a painter, certainly not a good one on actual canvas or even digitally, but this was really fun to do.
And the fact that these are so inexpensive just takes away the pressure of trying to come up with something that's significant.
Yeah, for less than the price of a cocktail in a decent restaurant, you're getting all the tools you need to make something that might be, lasting on your wall forever.
Like Vishal said, since these are actually now available fairly cheap, You don't fear messing them up. You can go over them. You can keep making new things.
Right.
And the canvas boards from Camlin are available in different shapes as well. So there is a smaller square canvas that you can get. There are also circular shaped, star shaped canvases.
Okay.
So it is actually now a fairly intermediate to artist level medium, because kids can also use it. Of course, artists use it.
Yeah, I think we should. And if you even are afraid of using something this big, like Minjal said, there's tiny ones that you can just pick up, pocket-sized ones that you can do great things on.
But speaking of mediums that we were much more familiar with in school, we all had our lined notebooks and our little grid notebooks for mathematics. And we found a very adult and serious and artist version of those, which is the thing we've been talking about for months and months, and that is the Rhodia pad.
The Rhodia dot pad. Well worn. This is Minjal's own copy.
And we did some nice artistic experiments with this.
Yeah. I've used graph paper in school. I kind of always liked the idea of graph paper for making comics, but because you could sort of plot out the panels.
Yeah.
But the problem with graph paper is that the lines were too heavy. They were
Very
either
heavy.
blue, or if you were lucky, they were blue. Sometimes they'd just be pure black graph lines, and you'd have to draw over them and hope that you could make out your parabolas and whatever else you were supposed to be drawing on them. But the dot pad is great because it's the dots are a nice grey, so they kind of visually at least go into the background. But you can do all the same great things with graph paper, right? Minjal, you did the most, let's say, textbook version of a Rhodia pad test drive.
Yeah, I was just coming to that. I basically love the Rhodia pads, and also, all kinds of, books with lines, because I don't really like drawing lines. I can't draw straight lines. So for somebody who's a lettering artist or a calligraphy practitioner, this is actually a great tool. You end up wasting less time, and you can get to your practice sessions quickly.
And I think as someone who's not into calligraphy, it was just a lot of fun to try out slightly mathematical or three-dimensional
Especially
things.
parallel lines, which is what you have really leaned into there.
Yeah.
Which you can't really, even with, let's say, a blank page and a ruler, you can't really visualize them as easily as if you have a nice grid here. And the dot grid allows you to kind of like see the diagonals or the,
And get
pretty
these very
easily.
specific angles, which is what I was experimenting with.
I went in the complete sort of edge case scenario of what happens when you take this and try to do something completely hand-drawn and without using a ruler. I only use the grid dots to sort of guide me. And yeah, you get an organic look, but it's also very contained, which is, I can't do even, when I'm doing freehand, things kind of like go askew, especially. Yeah, even if you're doing something artistic, I should try, doing portraits or things like that, where I can figure out parallels and sort of intersecting lines better. If you've never done this with a dot pad, highly recommended for this end of things. I mean, we have this kind of spectrum of things here.
Yeah, because we ended up using a brush and ink, and I ended up using sketch pens for this, and we're going to come back to sketch pens very soon. But Minjal used the parallel pen, which is a fountain pen, and fountain pens are the other thing that we used a lot in school. I don't know if kids still are kind of forced to use fountain pens these days.
That's how you improve your handwriting in school. So I think kids beyond the 8th or 9th standard are advised to actually use.
Right, and I think they're a great tool. We have covered several fountain pens for writing and sketching over the last several months. The parallel pen itself is a great fountain pen to try. But over the past few episodes, what we tried to do was go in a much more artistic direction, and we covered the dip pen and Ecoline watercolor inks.
And the dip pen, for those unfamiliar, is this kind of pen. It's a handle, a holder with a metal thing that you just like. I mean, it's The nib, it's not a thing. My terminology is sometimes a bit screwed up, but yeah, that is a beautiful tool.
And the Ecoline inks were just a great series of inks that we could use in a variety of colors, and we tried them both out. So
Yeah, so I used Sumi ink mostly for this, but also I think some other fountain pen ink. Minjal, this is your...
This is
you
with,
used a
Ecolines.
thicker...
Yeah,
Okay.
I used the broad nib.
So more of a calligrapher's nib.
That's right.
Right. So yeah, these are not your ordinary fountain pens. These are not even your fancy adult, giant barrel with a big gold plated nib, and I don't know, it's made out of alligator's tooth, whatever.
Exactly.
No, this is a professional tool. We know this because to this day there are many artists, comic artists and cartoonists around the world who use these kind of things, calligraphers as well.
Right.
You would think that, people have invented the fillable cartridge fountain pen. Why the hell would you need to go back to this? But there are there's
just so many uses which this can live up to, which the other pens can't. I mean for something like this.
As a comparison, it's almost like saying, why do you need a proper professional digital camera when a phone exists with a good enough camera? And yeah, you can change the nibs out of these. The holders are different. You get a certain type of just controllability that you expect as an adult, as a professional or an artist in there, that you may not have wanted from your drawings as a kid. But the inks, of course, you can use like in your fountain pen. In this case, I use the same brush pen, the same dip pen for these Ecoline ones that I did. We all kind of leaned into multiple colors and mixing things in completely different ways. I went for 3 separate ones. Minjal, you mix them kind of on the nib pretty much, right?
Right. Now the Ecolines, like we discussed, they're a blend of as in there's some confusion about whether they're watercolors or they're fountain fountain pen inks or what these are, but they're great to blend.
Yeah, they are.
These are splitting hairs among, I'm guessing, manufacturers based on what came before and how inks were made. There are constantly newer formulations, chemistry and things like that, and everyone tries to, I guess, figure it out based on what happened before, rather than, because then they can at least sell it to people and say, But yeah, the Ecolines, even if you think of them as just a fountain pen ink, or as a brush tinting.
Yeah, they work great as a ink that's just in a pen, and they also work great as pure washes and for painting. So and something in between. So it's really quite a varied.
And they're really bright. That's also what we discussed, right?
Yeah, they're saturated without seeming kind of cheap.
You're not. Let's choose the least colorful of these. This is a blue that's very blue compared to any fountain pen ink.
Yeah. It's what you, again, we talked about this with the craft stuff. It's what you imagine things will be when you're a kid, and then you kind of have it now. And that's a pretty great place to be. But in case you don't want to bother with, dips and ink pots and cleaning things up and all that, there's a great deal of innovation and, just usability in the pen and marker space. We tried out 3 or 4 this time in this last series.
I mean, we tried the wonderfully varied Stabilo 0.88s.
Yeah, this is something that's so popular that it kind of is ubiquitous. I've grown up looking at these in various places, even in just like supermarkets growing up. I'd never actually tried them. I think I may have tried them as a kid and not really cared for them. And, honestly, even as an adult now, I didn't really care for them. I was,
And along with these, we also tried out the Sakura Permapaques. And we tried out the Brustro brush pens. Now, what brings all these together is that all of these, the 3 of them, are essentially a more adult version of a sketch pen. They use exactly the same method. They have a felt tip. They have a dye-based ink in there that's water-based these days. So these are kind of updates, if you will, for adults and artists of what a sketch pen was for us as kids, and it's quite interesting to see the variety that they come in now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Stabilo always, I remember it on adults' desks rather than on, like children. It was kind of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost office stationery.
It is almost office stationery. The things we did were not office-like. This was what I did with the Stabilo. I think we liked it, but we didn't love it. At least I did not.
Yeah. I think it just had a lot of quirks, and we were, of course, stuck on the fact that it's called a fine liner, which for artists means a specific thing, and this is not quite that.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried other fine liners. We love the Unipins. We love the, I think, Sakuras. They have the... We haven't actually tried the color ones in those. We have to. But this one was kind of venerable in that we all have a childhood memory of seeing these as being, like kind of serious adult coloring pens, not sketch pens that we tried. You can see our episode on the Domes sketch pens, which are for kids, and those are actually pretty great for kids. Yeah, there's I sort of liked them, but I'm not going to run back to using them. I tried them even later, actually. I tried them on a sketchbook that I tried while, you can find that on my Instagram with like some spaceships, but it was okay. It was not...
I think maybe we'll just gift these to some children in the family.
Or some adults,
And the strange thing is we had we were talking about these three pens together because they are the spiritual equivalent of a sketch pen. But there's also another commonality in that we kind of had our issues with all of them.
Yeah, with none of them were the slam dunk that, the Poscas were. Which we keep coming back to. So
even when we came back to trying the Permapaques, which are, largely kind of wedge-shaped markers, being kind of the unique use of them.
And from a manufacturer that we love, who's Sakura, who we've talked about a lot of times before. And yeah, I didn't love this one.
But I think the conclusion we did come to is that they are really great wedge-shaped markers.
Yeah, they're good for the kind of use that I would have imagined maybe like 20 years ago, where everything was kind of an alcohol marker and you had that layered style. Unfortunately, they're called the Permapaque, which is a portmanteau that kind of has the word opaque in it.
Yeah.
And that opacity is not something that we found in these. We liked the opacity of the Posca, and I guess this was trying to be something similar, at least in marketing. I think that's a misjudgment.
Yeah.
Also, these are marketed as autograph pens.
Okay.
So, the website, Sakura website, when you look at Permapaque, they're very popular as autograph pens.
So are you saying that we don't like them because we're not famous enough?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, when we're celebrities, I think we'll come back to this and do a page of just of signing.
If they haven't dried up by then.
Yes, that was an issue which we had with both this one and the next one that we're going to do.
The thing that we found with all of these three updated sketch pens is that we found the Stabilo, which is also the thing used in these lines, by the way, the fine lines here, was not fine line enough. The Permapaque was not opaque enough. And the Brustro was not
metallic enough.
Metallic enough.
Yeah, because these were the Brustro metallic markers. We don't even have a piece of them with us because I think we gave them away.
We do gift stationery every once in a while.
Yes. And not always the ones we don't like, by the way. But we feel that, even if it's something we don't like, someone will find a good use for it. We found pretty okay uses for it, but,
yeah, I think our main issue with these was the consistency. And the fact that they were just not as metallic as a metallic pen should be.
Yeah, I mean you can get some interesting kind of textures to them, but they're not. The gold again was too red and muddy. The Permapaque gold was too green, I think, and muddy. So,
as Vishal said, it wasn't goldy enough.
Hashtag Stationers. Bringing that graphic back every time. I promised not to, but then,
Never keeping his promises.
Never keeping my promises. Except when it comes to stationery, which I'm very honest.
And now that we have covered, I think, pretty much all of the pieces that we spoke about over the past 12 weeks, it's kind of appropriate that we almost ended with these 3 pens because, as I said, the Stabilos were not fine pointed enough, the Brustros were not metallic enough, the Permapaques were not opaque enough, but our Goldilocks zone of stationery,
our fun adult stationery piece that you coveted as a kid and is now coming back, is on screen. And other sound effects. But basically, the Hauser Germany 4-in-1 ballpoint pens. I don't know.
4-color multi-pen.
Like, is it 1 pen? Is it 4 pens? Whatever it is, it's fantastic. We love this thing. It's the cheapest of, I think, all the things that we had in this series or this subsection. Totally bought on a whim because we had also bought its cousin, the Hauser INX Jazz fountain pen.
Doesn't sound right if Major doesn't say it.
Okay, so the Hauser INX Jazz fountain pen.
Which we'd also bought on a whim, which is also really cheap. But the things you can get out of this, including this and that.
Okay, I just want to say that I want to no longer use ballpoint pens to write. I just want to sketch with them and doodle and use it. And this one especially, has really it's probably, like Vishal said, one of the best 4 pens in one.
Yeah, please just actually go and watch our episode on it because we talk about it a lot more. We're not going to do that today because otherwise we just keep gushing about it. And I guess spoiler, that's kind of what we did in the episode too.
But we do go into a lot more detail about just the experience of using it and what's good about it for an artist especially.
Yeah, and we're talking about the theme of being kids and then converting those craft and art ideals and aspirations into being an adult and an artist. The 4-in-1 ball pen is an aspirational thing that I coveted as a kid. They were around when we were kids. Most of them weren't that great. I think it was like in the 80s, it was still not as refined as something like this is.
The inks were very gluggy. The mechanism was always kind of
getting
would
stuck.
Not quite work.
Yeah. Whereas now, as an adult, as an artist, you would think, no, there's no way that I'm going to buy one of those stupid pens. I'll buy 4 different pens or buy 4 fine liners or 4 markers or even 4 ball pens that have some kind of pedigree. And no, you don't need them.
Yeah, and this is quintessentially childhood, right?
Yeah.
4 colors. And I know that Pilot has also, Pilot and Uni also have 4-in-1s. So they're obviously very, very expensive compared to this.
I think we should buy them at some point purely to get back to making a test drive with these things because we enjoyed this so much.
It would be nice to figure out what the genuine difference is between something that's so inexpensive and something that's probably 3 or 4 times as much.
Yeah, because there's nothing in the other cases where we, especially in the markers where we didn't like certain aspects of it, the price was a factor. It's not like, we cared that, this was a bad pen because it's expensive. It was that it was a bad pen and it was expensive.
Yes, because you're willing to overlook certain quirks as long as you didn't spend too much on it. I think that's a very practical, a very valid way of looking at these things.
No, and we keep
they are tools.
We keep harping on about the Poscas, and the Poscas are expensive. The Poscas are hard to find sometimes, but they deliver on everything.
Now, in general, I think what we have all agreed on is that trying out things that we were using as kids has been just an absolute blast.
That's right.
Whether it's the variety of scissors that we introduced in that episode, or Fevicol, or origami paper, we all had a lot of fun playing with these, and it's something that we recommend for everyone. Like, pick up things that you think are only for kids and see what you can do with them. It is a lot of fun. Along with that, just trying out some of these things which are kind of upgraded more serious, more artistic versions of what we used when we were in school and when we were just kids in general has been also a revelation, because in some cases, for example, the sketch pen, you can go back and see our episode about the Dom sketch pen. The kid sketch pen itself has gotten so much better that the adult sketch pen versions like the Stabilo and these other pens really have a lot to live up to now. And in some cases, they're not living up to what the kids version is anymore.
Yeah, I would gladly go back to the Doms over the Stabilo.
Absolutely. I'd pick up a packet of Doms and use that rather than any of the markers that we used.
Even the Permapaques, even the Brustro metallic ones.
And in some cases, you have to also realize that something like a fountain pen is just not the same thing as something like an Ecoline ink or a dip pen, which is just so much more of a serious artistic tool, but is very, very much worth the effort and the patience required to figure it out.
Well, if you have had the patience to make it this far, we hope you have figured out that we are worth following and subscribing and seeing the rest of our works online of whatever that sentence meant.
But that's just for Minjal to figure out in the subtitles.
Yeah.
Isn't it, Minjal?
That's right.
But what you should do is check out inkymemo.com, which is the site that is for this brand and this endeavor. You'll actually find several transcripts. If you don't like watching our episodes, or if for some reason you want to, read them later, maybe when you're in a noisy place or something, you don't need to follow along with the subtitles. There are transcripts, and we'll continue to put them up. They take a lot of effort and time, but we're going through all our old episodes and putting them up as articles for you to read and search through and look at. So please go and check that out. We are available at all the social links on the screen and in the description.
And if you like this episode, we highly suggest that you look at this previous episode of ours, which was our previous roundup, and is kind of a similar but slightly different walkthrough of all of our art. Think of it as a sketchbook walkthrough, I guess.
Yeah, we are almost at 40 episodes. So there's, 30 something tools and test drives that we have done. We'll leave you to that, and we'll get back to doing more test drives. Until then, we hope you'll join us. I've been Vishal.
I'm Samir.
This is Minjal.
And go enjoy.